Well, we are back for another In the Know episode. Today we have Hillary Feder of Ask Hillary's, and we are reshooting today. We had some technical difficulties a couple weeks ago when we originally filmed this, so we are back. We feel like we're going to pack more of a punch with this one, just as we've already ran through the material. So today we're talking about brand touchpoints, but I want to get everybody kind of up to speed with Hillary. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Tell me about your title at Ask Hillary's.
So technically, I would tell you that I'm the founder and president, and I'm the lead idea generation person. That's what we do.
Okay, and how much experience do you have?
Oh, well, January will be 33 years of experience, and we've organically grown into the shoes that we wear today. I would tell you that 33 years ago, the core of what we do is still the same, which is we really work hard to make the people that matter most to our clients feel like they matter. The way we go about doing it, the type of clients that we serve are not the same as they were 33 years ago.
Well, there's definitely some progression there. It sounds
There is.
like. Yeah,
exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then where do you go to school?
I went to Boston University, graduated from SMG, which is their School of Management and Business, and I have a major in organizational behavior and marketing.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Some psych in there at all?
Oh, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, what I do takes, I think, we all think that we think rationally, but I will tell you that 70% of our decisions are not rational.
And there's just a little tip of the iceberg of the value that's going to take place today.
Yeah.
Okay, and one fun fact.
I make amazing chocolate chip cookies, and my favorite place in the world is our little lake place in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota.
Very cool.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's Detroit Lakes, that's north, right?
North and west.
North and west.
It is 3 hours and 40 minutes north and west
Wow.
of St. Louis Park.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we have a lake home up on Superior.
Oh.
So that's always fun.
Out of what city?
Bayfield area.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a gem for us.
We go there often. Yeah. We ferry over to Madeline.
Okay.
Friends who
Very cool.
have a place on Madeline.
Nice. Very
it's
cool.
Fun.
Okay. Well, without further ado, let's get started.
Great.
So today we're going to talk about brand touchpoints. We're going to talk about kind of what they are, why they're important, how to apply them, and then how to measure them over time. So I have a number of questions that I'm going to ask Hillary, and we're just going to kind of wrestle with this question of brand touchpoints and the importance of them. So I'm going to lob one up for you. What are brand touchpoints?
So, at the end of the day, brand touchpoints are those emotional connections that you unlocked to create those very deep relationships with your clients or prospects. They come through all different communication channels. So whether it's face-to-face or through email, through websites, but certainly using all of your communication channels, and they shape how a stakeholder interacts with your organization, and that can make or break your retention level, your attraction level, and even lead to people who become your champions.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start it off, and I have this picture in my mind of a company that does just fantastic work, but you land on their website and their website isn't very good, or it's hard to navigate.
Yeah.
And so if you're a new potential prospect and you're looking at potentially working with them and this website is kind of fidgety, the chances you're actually going to get to the point of having that quality experience is rather slim. So it's good. It's really important to make sure those touch points are a part of the brand.
Right. Well, today in so many ways, there's product everywhere. And so how you distinguish yourself, and there's job opportunities everywhere. So how you distinguish yourself oftentimes comes through the experience that you create, either in-house in an organization for an employee, or as an organization with your client base. And those touch points are the things that are, they're not about the transactions that you create together. It's about all the other things and how you really connect, more deeply.
Right, that gut feeling.
Yep.
Anything you can do to affect the gut feeling in a positive way.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so why are they important?
Well, you run an agency. talk to me about churn. I mean, if you want to increase your retention, lower your churn, you'll be able to reinvest dollars into your organization in a different way, because it takes a whole lot more to acquire a new client. I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they're important to really connect those people tightly to you and enable you to take your dollars and invest them differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's an element of having the right touch points in place to be attractive and to bring in new business, but also to, of course, you just touched on it, retain customers,
Right.
and to make sure that they stay with you. I think one touch point we have, it's pretty standard, but we have meetings each month to go over KPIs and metrics with our clients to make sure they know where we're going with things. And where we're at with certain things. And that's just one important touch point that if we didn't have, they'd be like, oh, so those Venzo folks over there, what are they actually doing
Right.
behind closed doors, so to speak? So it's an element of transparency.
Well, and it speaks a lot to
Right.
your brand,
Right.
your culture, your values, and being able to, we're all very, at some level, metrically driven. So, a touch point can have metrics to it. Not all touch points do,
Right.
but creating a balance of them is important. It's they're all interwoven together. They don't stand alone in their own little column.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So obviously we specialize in kind of the B2B space. You do a lot of work there. Would you say you specialize in B2B? Or
more than 90% of our work is B2B.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So let's talk about the differences there in touch points, because I feel like B2B touch points are different than B2C touch points. What are some differences?
Well, let's start boiling it down. Like when you think about it, people, so people B2C, people B2B, they're still people. And I have found through all the experiences we've had, when you treat people like people first, your employees, they react differently. They attach to you differently, and you're able to create powerful relationships. That said, in a B2B setting, oftentimes, you're trying to reach a group and recognize a milestone together, like maybe celebrating work completed, or that's the first one that comes to mind. And a lot of times, or you may be welcoming a new client into the fold of Venzo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are, when you think about it that way, when you think about B2C, oftentimes the thing that's most important is simply just recognizing relationship, expressing thanks, expressing gratitude. B2C is just, I don't want to say it's not as complex, it's just not as comprehensive.
Not as deep.
Not as deep.
Yeah, I think a lot of great points there. And I think about the word trust.
Mm-hmm.
And in B2B relationships, people trust the people behind the organization. They look at who's a part of the team. Whereas in B2C, they trust the company. Like, you trust Apple. You don't really know a whole lot about the product developers or the people developing the software. You trust the company. But then if you're going to go hire somebody to build your website, you kind of want to know who's doing it.
Right. Yep.
So I feel like those touch points have to be mapped out so that they're a little bit more personal. They're a little bit more team involved. At least that's a trend that we've kind of picked up on. So.
Well, and oftentimes those B2C relationships are, they just don't have the same longevity as you do with B2B.
Right. Right.
It's just different that way.
Yeah.
But they still, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is unlock an emotion
Mm-hmm.
from somebody who's been your client. Because, I could choose to shop at this retail outlet, that retail outlet, or the next retail outlet to get whatever it is that I need. Whether we're talking coffee shops, whether we're talking apparel shops. And of course, whichever one of those firms you are, you want me to come and pick you for my coffee all the time, or my clothes all the time, or whatever. And so it's still important to recognize that someone has chosen your establishment to do business with versus another.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I think we've obviously touched on brand touch points,
Yeah.
why they're important. We're going to shift gears now. We're going to talk about how to apply brand touch points to your organization. So the first question I have is, how do you identify what touch points make sense for a business?
That's the strategic part of what we do. It is, a lot of times when I enter work with an organization, they've been shooting from the hip. And whatever felt like, I'll say, the hot thing that day or that week, that's what they're doing. But really thinking about who your company is and what's important to you externally, and how does that manifest itself in how you express yourself externally to your client base, your industry partners. So we normally begin by creating an exhaustive list of things that could be recognized, could be touch points, and then start really narrowing down or bucketing together what makes sense based on how you do business, how you go to market, what you know about your client base, what you could learn about your client base. So there's a process. It's not just once and done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell me about the milestones you think about when you are, I know you do recognition already, so tell me about the milestones you think about.
Yeah, I think, you can break it down into internal and external, but generally anytime we onboard a new client, there's some element of like congratulations, or like we're going to get started on something and we're going to move mountains together. We need to capture that moment to make it exciting. If we finish a large rebrand project, there's usually some cool collateral we'll design and develop that they can hang up, and this is where we were, this is where we are, this is where we're going type of stuff. That's really cool. Internally, somebody comes on, we want to make them feel welcome. A 1-year anniversary, birthdays, family stuff. And I'd say we're probably about 70%, I'd say 50 to 75% of the way, like mapping that stuff out and really getting better at it, hence our discussions of potentially working together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's there and we're developing it, but it takes time, and you have to make it personal.
Well, you do. And a lot of times what I have found is that either an organization that I'm working with physically just doesn't have the time. So outside resources to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and they're more in the, they take more of the role of creating final decisions, and we work together collaboratively to figure out how to prioritize. So that's number one. And number two, sometimes you're too close to your own company to really be able to do this well.
Right.
And so
you're stuck in your own jar.
Yep.
And you can't read the label from the inside.
Exactly. Yeah. And having external resources to, you just see things differently. Like one of the things that I share with clients that we work with is I'm really into spending some intense time with them on the front end and at their organization, really to feel the pulse. And there are things that, just as I'm sure in the work that you do, when you walk in and you're cold, you can see things that to them are white noise.
Right.
And so you're able to just build things differently.
I love that. Yeah, and I think in our process, like we do a lot of ideal client interviews, and it's not just clients, they're also employee interviews that we do, or missed opportunities. And, as a third party, they're going to tell you things that they're not going to tell your client. They're going to come to you and kind of confide in you, so you keep it confidential, or you don't share who said what, right? So you share what they're saying, you just don't share who said it.
That's part of our process as well.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful thing because you can learn about the pain points, like what are these folks looking for? And that's one point I wanted to touch on, is education in the buying process as well as a touch point. So a lot of times in B2B, the buying cycle is like months and sometimes years. And so there's kind of this like poke and prod of, is this practitioner going to serve my company well? Or are they going to do a good job? And so they're constantly like looking at, oh, they did this project. Okay, that's cool. I saw this article. Okay, that's cool. How can you educate them in the buying process? And so, one great way to do that is content. And so you share with them, different pieces of content throughout the buying journey, and they start to kind of look at you in a little bit of a different light. So that's kind of more of a prospect touch point, or an external touch point that you're sending out emails or you're educating or having those conversations. But I feel like that's also pretty important.
But sometimes I heard everything you just said. Sometimes, so last year we work with a number of financial service providers across a continuum of different size organizations. And last year, in researching something, I found from Ernst & Young a really great trend report outlook for 2020. I found it early in 2021 on an outlook for that entire industry. Well, I turned that around and sent that to the people in my network who were in that industry space, and how appreciative they were that I found that I sent that. It was good knowledge for themselves, and in reading the report I found two elements that really directly connected to the kind of work that we already do to support them. And several of them said, I turned around and I sent this to my colleague in another office, or I sent it to. And so, it just really it tells them that you care about them more than the business, or as much as the business that you transact over.
Right,
and,
right.
and so you're all in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If we don't want to look like we're doing work on, I'll call it transactions and more around relationships, they don't either. And so figuring out how to cement that is it's key.
I love that. So we've talked about some different concepts and we've talked about some different examples.
Yeah.
But what are some tactile ways somebody can sit down and say, hey, here are some of the touch points that we need to incorporate, or what are some tidbits that we can give our audience to kind of take and run with?
So if I was going to start a list, it's one of the hardest groupings to actually manage internally, but it's actually one of the most important or productive, which is thinking about the curious questions that you ask the people that you interact with to understand what's going on in their lives. So, did they just have a baby? Did they just get married? Are they out ill, or somebody in their family ill, or they had a loss, or those kinds. So these personal life cycle, recognizing those in even small and meaningful ways is so powerful, because again, it's not something on a calendar I can check off. I recognized their birthday, I recognized our business anniversary, and those fall into a different bucket, and they're important. But so now we've talked about kind of personal milestones, those I'm going to call them a little more predictable, whether it's a birthday, whether it's your business anniversary, whether it's an annual recognition moment. And then there are those where the buckets around thinking about how are you onboarding, like you mentioned, how are you celebrating completion of a large project or even milestones within a large project, how are you welcoming a new employee, how are you recognizing metric success. Those are some of the kinds of touch points that people think about. But like I said, the list is exhaustive, and you usually have to start looking around how you gain information and insight, what you think you could learn about, and then trying to create patterns that become meaningful.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you could distill it into 2 or 3 steps.
Yep.
What would they be?
So step 1 is create an exhaustive list of ideas, like reasons that you would create touch points. Step 2 would be to start evaluating that list and understand who your company is, what will give you the biggest value to help you extend your brand, those types of
Customer
things.
pain points, stuff like that.
Yep. And then number 3, think about how you're going to implement, so that you can both attach financial resources, people resources, and develop a frequency of what feels important. That cadence, and those, I'll call them life cycle milestones that I mentioned, they're unpredictable. So while they may fit in, you have to make sure you've built enough other more predictable things that you can be in control of, to make sure that your cadence fits. And some companies think it's really important that they're touching base every month, and other companies believe that if I've reached out 3 times in a year, that's ample. And it depends on your industry, it depends on how many other opportunities you have to be present with those really important constituents in your business cycle.
Now that is how you create a transcendent customer experience right there. Those are your 3 steps. So take them and run with them. Okay, one final question underneath this subject. What are some of the do's and don'ts of touchpoint creation? I feel like there are places that people could go wrong.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to focus on the go wrong list, maybe. The go wrong list would be things like sensitivity to recognizing that in a different day, I'll say alcohol was a number one go-to gifting. And today, for so many different reasons, a lot of caution, right? Understanding who your constituents are. Are they really concerned about the environment? And then thinking about, okay, how do we manage packaging? How do we do things that might be representative, that we have social responsibility attached to the work that we're doing? Thinking about the investment that you actually make. In some industries, there are strict criteria for the types of gifts people might be able to accept. So if it's actually a tangible thing, thinking about that investment, and is that organization even enabled to do that? And so finding that right balance, understanding on the do list, understanding what's important to them and how can you build upon that. I don't know. Those are on the short list.
Okay.
Do's and don'ts.
Perfect. All right. So we've at this point discussed brand touch points, what they are, why they're important, how to apply. But okay, great. So we have these touch points mapped out.
Yep.
How do we know they're working? So we're going to discuss how to measure touch points at this point in time. So precisely that. How do you know a touch point is working?
So I think it's really important to remember, you said, how do I know if a touch point is working? I think it's really important to remember that you've developed, if you followed the pattern, you've developed a grouping of touch points, and measuring off of any one of them solo is like looking through a very narrow window. You have to think about the collection of them. That said, there are some touch points that naturally have a higher level of metric measurement attached to them than others. So if you've sent a trend report to somebody and you've used a service where you can see how many opens there were, see how many click-throughs there were, see how many people sent you a note and say, thanks. When I do something like that, or encourage our clients to do something like that, we are very specific on pointing out something in the report. And a lot of times people will feedback information to you that tells you they read the whole report or they read that part of the report. So there's things like that. If you are trying to do personal phone calls, you can measure your metric through how many calls did you place, how many callbacks did you get. And when you're thinking about placing calls, this would be about maybe a personal call to congratulate somebody for earning recognition within the industry, within the community. And then there are other touch points where there are no metrics. They just especially those personal milestone ones, they just fit in. So if in fact you can look at, well, have we earned more market share from this particular client? Is our retention rate of this client longer than other clients? Those are the big picture ways. But there is granular ways to measure parts of it. But I just want to make sure that you think about the fact that it's a whole group of touch points that are put together, and touch points are meant to help get to somebody's emotion and connect with them at the heart. And not everything that way can be measured.
Right. Yeah, I think you sum that up really nicely, because there are going to be some touch points where you can look at the data. You can see web traffic. That is a touch point.
Yeah.
But then you send out, holiday baskets or a get well soon basket. You don't know the KPIs of the basket.
You don't.
But you're probably going to get feedback. And maybe, you put together this basket and you had some items in there that were a little questionable and you get some bad feedback. Well, now you know that touch point isn't working and you need to adapt it.
Or you make sure that you use somebody who can help you. when we're asked to do baskets, just as an example.
Sounds like a shameless plug coming on.
Well, no, I'm not a plug, because anybody could choose to do this. Use whoever you'd like, but make sure you ask the question, especially on a gift basket, because a lot of times there can be a lot of, I'm going to call it mundane, everyday foods.
Right.
Not that they're not good, but we work really hard to have a small handful. I can't even say a whole handful. It's a small handful of what we call secret weapon foods, and they are in, at least one of them is in every basket presentation. And if it's a larger presentation, more than one of them is in there, because those are things that don't show up on grocery store shelves, don't even necessarily show up in gourmet sections. They're foods that are hard treats, sweet and salty treats that are harder to find, and you have to find a way to make sure you're differentiating. You can go to some large organization and order something directly online, but that's about what you get. And if you want something special, make sure you talk to the purveyor that you're working with to understand how they're going to help you stand out and represent your brand.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So we've touched on if whether or not a touch point is working, and then there's another question on here. How can you measure ROI of certain touch points? And I think we kind of tackled that as well.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, your comment on web traffic, my comment on let's just say you sent an e-blast kind of thing with a trend report, and looking at your open rates and your click-throughs and the kinds of notes you might have received back or the phone calls that you got. All of those are very soft. Well, they're soft and hard metrics. The bigger picture metrics are you gaining more market share? Do you have more conversation? Is your client retention longer?
Right. Yep.
Those are the big ones.
Yeah, and I think it's creating an experience that is conducive to the ideal clients or the ideal employees that you want to have working at your organization. Mm-hmm. You know, like certain elements are going to need to be a little bit more informational, and so you can measure website metrics, and that your users or the customers that you want more of are really doing their research before they purchase. Well, your website's probably going to need to be a little bit more bolstered than a landing page. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you have users that are more, they're more women, so maybe you have touch points that have messaging that kind of moves more towards that, or you have touch points that are more towards that, or branding that moves more towards that market segment. Mm-hmm. I think a great example is, and we're going B2C here, so okay. Target, for whatever reason, they only select brands to put in their stores that look and feel like the Target brand itself. Have you noticed that? Like a lot of times if you go to like their candy aisle and you look at like the different types of like cookies and stuff, like mm-hmm. you have Pepperidge Farm, you have some other types of brands that just feel in line with Target, especially cosmetics too. So I feel like there's an element of like knowing your consumer and trying to keep like those brand touch points on brand so that they speak well to those individuals, not just anybody. So
well, and that's true. And so Target's doing a great job when I am working with a client and it's a product that we need to create as a touch point as opposed to a report or an email communication or something. And let's just assume that we landed on a bag of customized hot chocolate and a piece of drinkware. And a client may say to me, well, why is that drinkware going to be that much? And it's like, because they're like, you can go and get, and I'm like, yep, you could, not one from me. So managing your brand and helping and making sure that the touch points you create, especially if they include product, represent the quality of who you are and how you go to market, because you don't want that disconnect. You want to be sure that it all flows together naturally. And not me, but in my industry history from a colleague, one of her clients literally bought thousands of pens, and she was only concerned about how inexpensive she could get that pen to be. Well, when the pen was leaving ink marks all over the user's fingers, you can only imagine that she didn't get very great reviews. And the packaging was a little bit bigger than that. I mean, now I've boiled it down to literally just a promotional product. But all of those elements, how it's packaged, what it's packaged with, the messaging it comes with, and then the physical product itself, the quality of it, does it match? Does it match what your organization does and how you go to market? Because if it doesn't, then it's the wrong fit.
Right, and it's off-brand.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think on that note, we're going to wrap up the discussion on brand touch points. But before we do that, I want to give you 30 seconds. Hillary, what's going on in your life? This is time for you to share a shameless plug. Do what you must, but you have 30 seconds.
You know what? It is December, it is the fourth quarter, and the number of our clients that do annual touch points that are, most of our clients are either pre-Thanksgiving or they're January, New Year's, so we are deeply in the midst of helping them do that. And for a lot of our clients, we've already moved into 2022 with major planning segments. So on a straight up business level, I'm totally involved in that. And on a secondary level, I've been lucky enough to be selected in a small business program through Goldman Sachs and Babson College. And so huge learning curve the last 4 months on entrepreneurship and really being able to dig deeper and create more knowledge both for myself and the colleagues I've been learning with. So there you go. That's what's keeping me busy.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Very cool. Well, Hillary, thanks again for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Perfect. Well, today concludes our episode. Please check us out on YouTube. Subscribe if you found this helpful. There's going to be a full write-up on our website with this episode. All the links will be there to go check out Hillary, her website, everything she's got going on. And that's all we got. So thank you.